Hello and welcome to this video where we are going to make a lovely and very comfortable ear warmer. I wanted to show you the yarn that I'm using really quick. This is the Capra DK weight yarn from We Crochet. It's a lovely merino wool and cashmere blend, and I'm using the color Sagebrush. And I'm going to be using it with a G hook, which is 4 millimeters. This pattern is written in multiple sizes, so you're going to want to refer to the pattern for the exact numbers that you need. But to get started with this pattern, you're going to leave a nice long tail, maybe 8 inches or so. Create your slip knot, and then chain the appropriate number of stitches. All right, when you're done with your chains, we can start row 1. And in row 1, you're going to start by working in the 3rd chain from the hook, so skipping the first 2 chains. And in this stitch, we are going to work a single crochet, and then chain 1, and then in the same chain, work another single crochet, just like that. Then we're going to skip a stitch and do it again, putting a single crochet, a chain 1, and then another single crochet in the same stitch. Repeat this all the way across your chain until you're left with only 2 chains left. Okay, when you're left with only 2 chains left, you're going to skip the first one, and in the very last chain, put a double crochet. And now we're done with row 1. For row 2, you're going to chain 1 and turn. And across this row, the only thing you need to pay attention to are these fans that you've already done, because you're going to work into the chain space that you created. The only problem is there doesn't really look like there's a chain space because it's so small. So I recommend looking at the front until you get comfortable with this and putting your hook in between the 2 single crochets for each time. But once you find where you're supposed to be working, you're going to do the same thing as we did in row 1. You're going to single crochet, chain 1, and single crochet again. Work this into every chain space across the row. Okay, now when you're done with that, all you need to do is find your beginning turning chain, or the chains that you skipped during our very first row, and in the top of that, place a double crochet. For a while now, you're going to be repeating row number 2. So all you need to do is chain 1, turn, and keep working the exact same way we did in row 2. And at the end, you're going to want to put a double crochet stitch in the top of your turning chain. This will keep your stitch count nice and consistent and keep your edges straight. And as you keep going, you'll probably get a lot more comfortable with exactly where to put your hook, especially since our repeats of single crochets with a chain in the middle kind of create a little bump. So you're basically continuing to work into the tops of those raised areas. So now keep going for the appropriate number of rows depending on the size that you're making. All right, now after you have created the full length of your headband, we are still going to chain 1 at the end of our last row, and we're going to single crochet around our raw edges. This is actually optional. You don't have to do this. If you just want to have a really clean edge or a little bit of extra width or both, this is going to be in the directions for you. So after we chain 1, I'm going to single crochet into the sides of those double crochets and then in between as well. So we're going to repeat this all the way down the row, going in between the rows and then into the sides of the double crochet. We're going to repeat that all the way down the raw edge. Something I do want to point out is that as you do your edging, you want to make sure that it will stretch. It'll stretch with the rest of the work. All right, once you get to the end of your first edge, we want to go down the other edge as well and make it nice and clean. And we want to make sure that both of the edges do end up looking nice and clean. So we don't really need to go along this edge, but I'm going to do that rather than break off the yarn and start working again over here. But I'm just going to go ahead and slip stitch. You can single crochet along the end if you want. Just make sure you don't add too much length, but I'm just going to go ahead and slip stitch, trying to keep the slip stitches somewhat loose. Okay, now I'm done slip stitching just to get across there. And I'm going to go ahead and chain 1 and do this edge exactly like the other one, putting a single crochet into in between each row and into the sides of the double crochets so that we get a nice clean edge there. Once you finish your piece with your nice edges, go ahead and see if there's a side that you prefer to be the outside of the headband. If there is, go ahead and leave that side facing up. I'll go with this side. Then take your edges and put them together facing you. Next, you're going to change it so that they only overlap halfway, like this. And then fold the extra on the outside so that it goes around the other end of the work, like this. You should be left with 4 layers that fit all together and that are equal so that they completely overlap as much as they can. You may need to adjust slightly and pull them a little farther apart or overlap them a little bit more, but you're going to want to end up just like this. And you want to do it very carefully in this way because you don't want there to be any other twist in your headband at all. The very last step that you're going to do is seam this together, just like this. So I'm going to take an end of my yarn, or even use both ends, and I'm just going to use a tapestry needle to sew back and forth along all these layers. If your ends are not long enough, or if you just prefer to use a new piece of yarn, you can do that. Okay, so now with my tapestry needle, I'm just going to go in and out of each row, and I'm going to try to catch all 4 layers with every single stitch. All right. When you're done seaming this up, you can bind off your yarn. And since I do have another piece of yarn here, I'm just going to tie these together with a little knot. And since that is secured nice and tightly, I'm going to go ahead and trim my ends. You can certainly weave them in if you want. And now your headband is done. The only thing that you need to do is turn it right side out. And now you should have a beautiful twist in the very front of your headband. And with that, you're all done. Thanks so much for joining me with this project.